Recording in progress. To me, July 1st has always been a day to celebrate all that's great about this country. My ancestors came here from both Britain and China to make a better life for themselves. And for me, Canada has always been home. But not all my family was welcomed here. I was shocked to discover that for my Chinese grandmother and other Chinese Canadians, Canada Day held a dark and humiliating secret.
The year I was born, they passed a law saying they don't want any Chinese in Canada anymore. It was effective for July the 1st, Dominion Day, and my mother and my father would caution us, you do not celebrate July the 1st.
My father came to Canada in 1913. It took 18 years for him to be reunited with his family and his wife.
I don't know my father because I was just born a year, then he gone. I never seen him since that until I was 10.
I wanted to learn more about this version of Canadian history that was left out of my school books. So I set out on a cross-country journey to uncover the stories of those who lived through the dark years.
People are saying this is historical, this is the past. It is not the past, it's today, here and now.
I'm still here.
Mr. Wing. Mr. Wing is still here. He's not in the past, he's in the today. He's today's future. It's a great privilege for us to have Mr. James Wing here, one of our surviving head taxpayers and a true pioneer and builder of our community here in Montreal.
我呢來年呢對後一年，我嘅父親呢就係我叫500歲，咁我攞呢個奶。That's a tax certificate. When you pay that $500, then they give you this certificate with your picture on. Okay? So that's my only right to come to Canada.
Even a child would have to pay $500?
Everybody.
Yaya was young then. How old were you, Yaya, when you came to Canada?
About 9 or 10, very small.
That's good. How old
My father came to Canada, wash dishes. While washing, he learned to be a cook. Later on, with friends, he operated restaurant himself. And then naturally, when he operated restaurant himself, he saved the money, brought me over here, but he paid from the saving the $500.
我個碌講500歲，500到省呢500歲啊，年先能夠500能夠買兩間屋，你是play年咗萬年的眼。
Somehow the families got together, a village would get together and amalgamate enough money, and the ones that are over here would help them over there. My father came because the 3 older brothers helped. And as a matter of fact, the head tax didn't stop my mother after the First World War.
In the early days, the Chinese came to the state to go to California. There's a gold rush. That time China was so poor, no industry, only farmers. That's why they call it this place, North America, Gold Mountain, because if you come here, you return rich. Well, after the gold rush, Chinese came to Canada, they were railroad builder, the government have no objection.
John A. Macdonald said that in Parliament, that we have to accept Chinese labor or we're not going to be able to finish this railroad.
Honourable friends, the Chinese immigrant has no common interest with us, and while he gives us his labour, he's paid for it. And he is valuable the same as a threshing machine or any other agricultural implement. It will be all very well to exclude Chinese labour when we can replace it with white labour. But until that is done, it is better to have Chinese labour than no labour at all.
Many lives were lost. Many Chinese labor lost their lives in the course of building because they have to blast, using dynamite to blast through the Rockies to open up the channels. And when that railway was eventually completed, that paved the way for Confederation. For had it not been for the Chinese laborers, I don't know when whether BC would have become a part of Canada.
After the railway was completed, then they don't want the Chinese laborers. They want them to go home, and they don't want any more Chinese immigration coming to Canada.
There is probability of a grave injury being caused to the working classes by the large influx of laborers
Not
from
only are they
China.
monopolizing the laundry business and the growing of vegetables in British Columbia, but they are driving skilled miners out of employment.
The white society, they got alarmed. They said, hey, wow, they breed like flies and more are coming. Wow, pretty soon this is no longer going to be white man's country. At first, they put up a head tax. They thought that would be a deterrent, $50. And yet they still come. They come, and they were still pouring in. So they jack it up to $100. And that couldn't stop them. They still keep coming and coming and coming. Finally, they raised it to $500, and even $500 couldn't stop them.
They paid the $500 willingly. They came within the context of the Canadian Immigration Act. The irony is that the Immigration Act, or the $500 head tax, was imposed to keep them out.
To me, I think it was a terrible insult. The kids that put their heart into helping build the railroad, which was the lifeline of Canada. As F.R. Scott wrote, he wrote this in response to a poem written by Ned Pratt. Where are all the coolies in your poem, Ned? Where are the thousands of Chinese that swung their pickaxes with bare hands at 40 below? From that first to the millionth spike they drove, to that dressed-up act of Donald Smith, who has sung their story? Did they fare well in the country that they helped unite? Did they get one of the 25 million CPR shares? Is all that Canada has to say to them is what's written in the Chinese Immigration Act?
I bought a boat in Hong Kong. It took a month to get to Victoria. When we get off the ship, they send you into a house and they lock you up there. Not only me, I mean, when I say me, it means some other Chinese boys too, you know. There's no girls, of course, only boys. Chinese boys like me.
我來澳嘅移民局嗰啲要入嘅函至多有。
They keep you there, you don't know how long. Depends how much money you pay.
外軍哋係要幾個錢俾㗎，嗰啲佢哋黨都放得出嚟。
I think my father paid $50 or something. So I was kept in there 2 weeks. I know some people kept there for a month.
I came to Gold Mountain because I am poor. To my surprise, I was kept in a prison cell. I can see neither the world outside nor my dear parents. When I think of them, tears begin to stream down. To whom can I confide my mournful sorrow but to etch in a few lines on this wall?
From Victoria, then we came to Montreal. 5 nights on the train. My father says, met me at the radio station. I couldn't even address him as a Papa or Daddy. I never used that word in my home. When I was a baby, I never have a father play with me that can say, hey, daddy, daddy. I had no experience. I just couldn't call daddy, or if I doesn't pass, the word doesn't pass my throat.
For the last couple of years, I've been carrying around a copy of a head tax certificate, my father's head tax certificate. And the reason I've been doing that is that I wanted to, I guess I wanted to experience what it was like to carry around this piece of paper that was probably worth $100,000 in today's money. For many years, it was his only evidence that he belonged to this country. Even though he came in 1913, he wasn't allowed to become a citizen until 1947.
In those days, we were worse than second-class citizens. We were regarded as aliens. We couldn't vote in election time. We weren't allowed to enter public facilities like city-owned swimming pools and city-owned golf courses. So Chinatown was our entire universe because we were discriminated the moment we step outside of the Chinatown boundary.
佢哋落反見你，都就話過，唉，名嘅背景嘅人就啲個，嗰啲好其實唔係，係唔係基本。
Everywhere is discrimination. Every day is discrimination. We never mix. They never like to be your friend.
Stinky Chinaman, standing on a fence, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents.
Of course you don't like it, but what can you do when you have a bunch of kids singing? Well, how can you fight back? Everybody hate you. Not only the kids don't like it, the grown up doesn't care too much. So how do you just don't ignore them and just,
One thing that happened to me that will never go away. The second or third day I went to public school, I was frightened of the other boys because they were so rough. You know, and they'd do a tug of war or something, or they'd pile on top of each other and they'd, rough around a bit. And anyway, after school, I think the second day I was at school, maybe the third day, and 3 boys chased me, and I fell down, and they peed on me, and I had to fend them off as best I could, and they kept aiming for my mouth and my eyes, and I hid under the porch, and I didn't go home. You would think that after all these years I can talk about it. But
they don't look at the Chinese as civilized people. That's not the kind of immigrant that Canada was. There are a lot of European people, Polish people came to Canada. But the government went there because they want to open up the prairie. Government welcome them. They say, you come in Canada, in the prairie, I give you a piece of land free, you farm.
The story of how my family came to Canada differs depending on who's telling it. I learnt that my mother's British ancestors were given Dominion land for free, at the same time as my father's Chinese family was charged the $500 head tax. By 1923, the Canadian government had collected over $23 million in head tax from 81,000 Chinese. It was almost enough to pay for the $25 million Canadian Pacific Railway that the Chinese had helped to build. Yet the head tax is just a small part of this story. On July 1st, 1923, it would be replaced by legislation making the Chinese the first and only people to be excluded from Canada because of race. This exclusion would last for 24 years, immeasurably more than the price of the head tax. It would cost Chinese Canadians, their families.
The people of British Columbia will not permit this country to be made a dumping ground of yellow, cheap labor.
The Conservative Party stands for a white Canada, the protection of white labor, and the absolute exclusion of
So the
Asiatics.
result might well be that the birth rate will hardly keep up with the death rate. And in time, we may look to their gradual elimination and the final solution to the Chinese question in Canada.
So eventually, they put the foot down and say, we got to pass an Exclusion Act. No matter how much you want to pay us, we don't want you. So no Chinese came in ever since, from 1923 on, when they passed the Exclusion Act.
It was effective for July the 1st, Dominion Day, and we were not allowed to celebrate it. Of course, we didn't understand, It took a lot of explanation before we accepted the fact that our cousins cannot join us here, and we'll never see Grandma on either side.
At that time, I'd say about more than 2/3 of the Chinese population in Canada were bachelors, because most of them left the family behind.
At home, I have a mother to take care. Now I kind of no mother anymore. I live with the workers in the restaurant. The people work long hours. Why did they work long hours? They don't care. Why? They have no family. If they don't work, where they go? So they don't care too much. They have no home, no wife. All they have to go back to where they sleep. That's it.
My beloved wife, it has been several autumns now since your dull husband left you for a far, remote alien land. Yesterday, I received another of your letters. I could not keep the tears from running down my cheeks when thinking back to the time of our separation. Because of our destitution, I went out to try to make a living. I am detained in this secluded corner of a strange land. My beauty, you are implicated in an endless misfortune. I wish this paper would console you a little. This is all I can do for now.
So do you want to tell Emily? Maybe you can tell Emily, how did you meet Yin Yin?
How did I meet her?
Yeah.
I just,
How did it-
somebody bring her to me. I just take a look at her. I said, and then they ask you, you like her? I said, yes, that's it. That's my first child. My son.
uncle.
I married, I got the children, I came back. See, at that time, the Canadian government have a law. Have a law. You can go to home, everybody live Canada, happy, come back within 2 years.
如果你唔翻嚟呢，佢推掉你嘅的命你嘅權利翻過梗係。
Naturally, I send money to support the family. Of course, she have to do her part. I have a field. She have to do the farming. I look up the children. For money, sorry, the only source is from me.
So when did you go back to China again?
When I returned, my son was in high school, and my daughter was just ready to go. Anyway, they were teenagers.
We had been wed for only a few nights. Then you left me for Gold Mountain. For 20 long years, you haven't returned. For this, I embrace only resentment in my bedroom, heaving a sigh for the faraway sojourner who hasn't come home. Endless longing for you leads only to streams of falling tears.
My father married my mother in 1932, and for the next 19 years, just saw him for a year at a time for maybe 3 years. Each time he went home, he sold a business or he borrowed money. when he went back to China, and each time my mother bore him a child.
Không quay sẽ kêu rồi anh này quay cần ngày gái hát quay kêu chưa quay cái xèo lo quay kêu xin quay kem nên kêu xin gầy lo kem nên là đây thì thu gia nào cho nó.
She was alone raising 2 or 3 kids, trying to support her mother-in-law, and it was very difficult.
And I remember my mother and father and uncles and other relatives talking about the Chinese being invaded by Japan. We knew that it was serious in China because we heard about the atrocities in Nanking and Beijing.
She saw other wives of head taxpayers around her die of starvation, die from war. She saw their children die. And my mother says, I remember that the sky rained bombs. The ground was littered with bodies of my friends who did not have enough to eat. 4 out of 5 of my friends died in China waiting for their husbands to come home.
The Chinese occupy the area, the people suffer. No more central government, no more Bank of China. How can you send money? No bank to send to. No letters. No, you can't send a letter.
Okay, the symbol bỏ xoay là hơi cái siêu này cú gì cái bài đó đểกันđể này nghe này yêu tiền lo này sao mà khai thằng quay bài là có lo.
My wife not only look after herself, she also have to look after my part of the family. So what she did, she went to Port City, buy what they need in a small town. She went buy the sugar and carry it back on her shoulder and sell the sugar, make a little profit to keep the family going.
You này có hơi cà doan này hay chơi càng hiền này doa kia, hay những người nam có hơi ba lần quay cái lần này mò can gái là có ba này sáng nhỏ mò vậy, quay giảm hơi cà khá kia cái bên thôi.
That was the unseen impact when my father was here, unable to bring her to Canada.
We volunteer to fight because in our hearts, I believe that we were born in Canada. By international law, we should be Canadian citizens. If the government doesn't recognize that, maybe the way to change it would be to serve, to enlist in the army, and then go and fight to show the government our loyalty, our dedication. After we come back from the war, we would have solid credentials to demand our rights and privileges. And that's how we went to war and fought for Canada.
You felt that you were given the opportunity to do something heroic. At least you felt that you were part of Canada. My God, I mean, the uniform says Canada right there.
Right away, we noticed the difference. We were treated with respect and, high regard. After my discharge from the Army, I launched the magazine Chinatown News to campaign for racial equality and to fight for a better Canadian society. The community also mounted campaigns to lobby Ottawa to remove the Exclusion Act to enfranchise the Chinese population.
There was no way they could deny us the vote after that.
Xí nên lao phủ nó tôi nơi loại này từ mò mất siêu tục lao còn ngã có hang còn mà giờ gì mà có hạt tin bệnh để xí họ tu dục.
Mấy ai chuẩn thấy chiến nền xí gì bà chân vậy là Dọn thay chén thì xí mày, quay mà đi sẽ sang như mày kia thân mà có phi cây phân nó tao phân nó nè. Hiện liên hiện cái này cả phu quân đến bữa xin đó, hiện liên hiện nó có hai cái mà nó sang đây thó và những cái nhìn nó cắn nó cái để nó slide đã này nó slide nó nhìn slide.
Could you imagine a wife coming over to meet her husband for the first time in 23 years? My God, that's a lifetime. You throw murderers in jail for 25 years with no parole.
I brought my wife over in 1952 and 55. I got a son, and he's Simon. That time my older son and my older daughter didn't come with her.
And I know of quite a few families. They're not family at all because of the two older brothers are completely from a different culture. They speak an entirely different language. There's no way you can live as a family. There's no way.
These movies of my father's family in Canada are extremely rare. Due to the exclusion, there exists little footage or photographs of Chinese-Canadian families growing up together prior to 1947, when the act was repealed. Of the 5 generations of my family to live in Canada, I am the first to be born in an era without discriminatory policies specifically targeting the Chinese.
We now have a charter which defines the kind of country in which we wish to live and guarantees the basic rights and freedoms which each of us shall enjoy as a citizen of Canada.
There was a Mr. Mac from the Chinese community in Vancouver watching the news when Trudeau brought the Constitution back to Canada. He went to his Member of Parliament, who was Margaret Mitchell at the time.
Last summer, I met an elderly Canadian who asked, in view of the new charter, that the government compensate for the $500 head tax, which he, because he was Chinese, was forced to pay in 1919 to come to Canada. I forwarded his request and his receipt to the Prime Minister, who has not seen fit to reply.
I didn't know what the head tax was because I came in 1966. I immigrated to Canada. So I arranged for Margaret Mitchell to come to my radio station for an interview. And during the interview, it occurred to me that it must be more than just Mr. Mac who paid the head tax. So I just said on the radio, I say, look, if you have paid the head tax, if you come to the radio station here, we will register it for you. And we'll turn it over to Margaret Mitchell, who will present it to the Parliament. So that Saturday, close to about 400 people showed up. They were lined up all the way from the stairwell, and then along the wall here, this the sidewalk here, along Canada Trust, and then around the corner. I was surprised because I didn't know so many people still have the head tax. They came with the original head tax certificate. And then we did it for 3 Saturdays in a row, and we got close to 1,200 people registered. So that was the beginning of the head tax movement for redress in Vancouver. All injustice must be addressed.
BC Coalition of Head Taxpayers. Across the sea, this land to make free, and we made the sacrifice, and you made us pay the price. 20 million in tax, we demand that you give it all back. What is our dues? We want redress for the head tax blues. We want redress for the head tax blues.
Mr. Speaker, as a result of the head tax, the government at the time collected approximately $23 million from about 81,000 Chinese immigrants. The present value of that today would be over $1 billion.
I don't think it's asking a heck of a lot. If there's 25 million people in Canada, I'm not sure. It costs $1 each.
The redress movement started by Mr. Mack, and unfortunately he's passed away now, originally asked for individual compensation and apology, and also a promise that this type of legislation will not happen again in the future.
I'm really not too keen to get the money, but it says something like a name, you know. You treat me badly, maybe apologize or compensate it in some way, we accept it for.
Not everyone is for redress. Some of them don't want to talk about it because it's a shame to raise this issue and to say, oh, I paid the head tax. To me, that's a very normal phenomenon because the Chinese community is not just one community that's homogeneous.
When the government put up the head tax, the Chinese weren't forced to pay. It was an option. If they want to come to Canada, they have to pay an admission. Essentially, that's what it was.
我嗰個為世界各國旗下嘅民族嘅呢，一樣講我哋冇乜收穫，會有嘅外啲環境，用百人都款埋嘅公平，可唔公平？
幾個我都唔知，我都唔明呢啲咁嘅嘢。係咯，人頭稅要認真要爭取啊！
你睇啊，政府俾翻呢個賠償，我哋有冇機會？
我諗嘅機會都好微嘅，意見都唔一致。
You got it. It's reasonable, but there's no way to settle the money after so many years. It's not one government that did it. It's all the government for the ages. Now, which government say now is my responsibility? I'm going to pay. But if I pay, when I start to count the interest, it's too complicated.
日本就收到，但係我哋中國人嗰啲人頭稅就收唔到啦。應該，係啦。OK。仲有速回水添啊
My father's generation and other forebears are gone. But I haven't forgotten it, okay? And maybe I'm in a position to demand it because I was an officer in the Canadian Air Force.
The Chinese Canadian veterans passed a resolution saying no need for the government to compensate the head taxpayer. They say we're Canadians now, let's pay attention to the present day problems.
Mà có giấy phản ánh ảnh, tôi có anh sang mà xíu nghĩ sang cái gì là, tôi đã chẳng phụ thấy kêu lo này thì mà quay cái này cái thay liền à, để đến đây phản ánh ảnh, tôi ăn tôi không đi rồi mà.
You take something happened hundreds of years ago, and then you punish the present generation. Is that right?
For the people who in the Chinese community who are not going for redress, that's fine. They're entitled to their own opinion. And the next thing I would say is that they should shut up after they say their piece. They should leave the redress to the people like us who will continue to fight for the redress. That way the community will be of one voice and the federal government will settle with us more expediently.
The government understands the strong feelings underlying these requests. We share the desire to heal those wounds. The issue is whether the best way to do this is to attempt to address the past or to invest in the future. We believe our only choice lies in using limited government resources to create a more equitable society now and a better future for generations to come. Therefore, the government will not grant financial compensation for the requests made.
She can say no, but it doesn't mean that we are going to go away. Democracy takes time, and we will not give up until we see a resolution.
We always spoke about the head tax in our family. We spoke about it around the dinner table. And it was something that it was unfinished business. But in about 1999, I spoke to my mother, and I said we should take action by ourselves as a family. My mother represented the spouses, and I represented the sons and daughters of head taxpayers.
To bring it out into the daylight like this is so important, and to let other Canadians see the wrong that's been done.
When we finally went to the Supreme Court, they turned the case down. There was some disappointment, but clearly one of the judges said this was just a terrible piece of legislation, that it was racist, it was deplorable. But I think there was such a groundswell of support from other Canadians that we knew we were going to forge ahead.
Despite my age, at 81, I've been obsessed with riding one of my motorcycles across Canada. Maybe I'll collect petitions for the head tax and other discriminatory immigration acts, of the past. And for the pioneers, too. When the railroad workers on, I like to go and do a little rabble-rousing, maybe ride into Parliament with the thing up the stairs or whatever, make a lot of noise.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Kwan is a constituent in East Vancouver, and he's 95 years old. On October the 28th of this year, he stood up very slowly, and using a thick black brush, he wrote out in calligraphy, "The government has no need to drag its feet in repaying the head tax."
Hey, hi, Charlie. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice morning.
Yeah. Are you warm enough, Charlie?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nice to see you. Charlie Kwan and I connected immediately. We are very much alike. We trust each other, so I think that's very important. I've decided that I will do what I can to help Charlie present his demand. Because, my God, how many are left? So I think it's a worthwhile effort to help Charlie, and I'm committed to do that.
Nếu mà họ hiếp, tôi mong muốn sau rồi. Nếu họ hiếp thì sẽ có mà để ai em yêu sinh dùng em ấy phần những ngàn cái nào sẽ có yêu sinh dùng luôn mà.
What we are asking for is nothing less than what a Canadian would ask for. We become full members of the Canadian society by having our story put right.
It has been 20 years since head taxpayers first lined up outside the radio station in Vancouver. For the few that remain, the fight is not over.
This was a very important event here in Montreal. I wish my father was here, but I'm glad that Mr. James Wing is here to see the Chinese community come together, be unified on this issue, and for the first time, begin to have a political voice.
I'm very happy to see you all here to give us support of this head tax issue. I admire this country, but we must remember what they did to us in the past.
We're still waiting for that promise to be fulfilled.
In the same school where hundreds of head taxpayers rallied for redress and have since passed away, their stories will live on with the next generation.
Lo and behold, no Chinese entered Canada between 1923 until after the war, 1947. And that was the same year that they decided to give us the vote. The reason I'm speaking out is for the older generation and for the younger generation. I hear children, they could be my grandchildren, for goodness sakes, and they are in some ways. And they're talking about something that happened to their grandparents. So I said, how many more generations is it going to keep going?
It's hard to say what we're learning from this. And my question is, have we learned from it? let's look at how we treat people today. How are we treating people that we fear? How are we treating people from the Middle East? How are we treating Muslims in this country? I think the challenge is to not just view this as something of the past. It's living history with us still today.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all thy sons' command, with glowing heart we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. All through my life, I've asked myself that. Am I Canadian? You know, all through my life, I've asked that question.
By sharing their stories with me, the survivors of the head tax and exclusion years have helped me to discover my roots in this country. I now know that with every mile of track laid and every dollar of head tax paid, I am Canadian. And as a Canadian, I'm taking back that day of humiliation and calling July 1st my own.
And the government knows that we will not go away.
Okay, thank you.